Welcome back to the Golden State with Mates post-game live after the Warriors suffer another defeat. That's what, their 16th now in the last 23 games, 108-96 to the Indiana Pacers on Friday. The offensive struggles continue for Golden State, albeit this was a little bit more expected given the absences of Steph Curry, Draymond Green, and of course, Jonathan Kuminga and Andrew Wiggins, who had already missed Thursday's win over the Pistons. So you would say Golden State's four best players out of the lineup, and then you also still had the absences of Brandon Bajemski and Gary Payton second on top of that. So 6 of the top 10, 11 in the rotation maybe, and clearly they're 3 leading scoring options in Steph, Kuminga, and Wiggins. So pretty standard result. Like you couldn't question the effort that the Warriors put in there. Like they actually kept pretty close with the Pacers throughout the game. They were down 5 at halftime. They were still within 5 with just under 9 minutes remaining, and then the Pacers went on a pretty quick, easy 8-0 run, and from there, the game was pretty much done and dusted. So, again, can't fault the effort. Thought the Warriors battled hard, fought hard, but they were simply outgunned, outmatched by a far more talented Pacers team based on the Warriors' absences. So, just a few comments from you guys. GSW says, am I watching the Santa Cruz starters versus the Pacers right now? Also says, I've seen enough. Start Quinten Post over Trace. Okay, so before I say that, just a couple other comments because I'll get into this. Damien says, Gee, Patton Post should have had Buddy's minutes. Kerr doesn't know when to take Buddy out of a game. Then next says, Buddy having the same amount of points as Pat is unacceptable. Okay, so let's talk about, I think, my biggest takeaway from this, because I think there's very little, like you're missing so many guys, you're missing all your key guys. There's very little to take away from this. However, if I am to take one thing away from it, it's Quinten Post's 7 minutes that he played on the floor, and not necessarily him from an individual standpoint, but it continues to reiterate to me Golden State's need for a stretch big. And QP came out, had a career high, albeit only 6 points, got some minutes in the third quarter, and then played the last, 90 seconds basically of garbage time after both coaches had taken their main guys out. And I thought he was exciting. I think he's still a developmental project piece for the moment, at least across the remainder of this season as a two-way contracted player. Not sure I'd be taking on GSW's thoughts of him starting over Trace or even him being in the rotation generally at all. But I was impressed. I was excited by his minutes. And more importantly, just a couple of things that happened while he was on the floor. So first of all, he made a 3, which is his first career 3 in the NBA. So congratulations to him for that. Very clean pick and pop situation, I think, from a Dennis Schroder pick and pop, which again, that goes like Dennis Schroder's been so ineffective for the Warriors. If he's got a guy that can not only be a role threat like Trace can, I suppose, but also a pop threat like Quinten Post can be, then all of a sudden he himself could be far more effective. The other play I think that was even more glaring to me, like just having a guy that can shoot threes that's 7 foot tall from the top of the arc is one thing, and he took 2 and made one of them. But the more glaring play for me came late in the third quarter, where there's kind of a two-man game between Buddy Hield and Quinten Post, and Buddy ended up parting the seas and getting a wide open layup, and no one else was in the paint. Like there was no Pacer defender anywhere near him, no one in the paint. And Thomas Bryant, who was obviously the opposing big man guarding Quinten Post, he was out on the perimeter waiting for the pick and pop. And I just watched that and saw Buddy Hield, who's not a great finisher around the rim, any kind of ounce of contact, and Buddy's not a great finisher around the rim. You can say that about a lot of Warrior players, it must be said. But for him to get a wide open layup with no one else in the paint guarding him, I think showed to me that, hey, okay, we need to get a stretch big, because that is the kind of thing we talk about all the Warriors' issues in terms of finishing around the rim, and it continued in this game. And my goodness, it is disgusting to watch. Like Trace's struggles continue, just missed a couple of easy ones. He had one where he kind of passed the ball he looked to pass the ball on the roll and then realized he was kind of open and then missed a point blank layup over Siakam that he should have made. It's getting really frustrating, and he's not the only one. Golden State's inability to finish in general is very, very tough to watch. But part of it is because they have to take probably more contested layups and shots at the rim compared to other teams, because there's just not the shooting threat out there, particularly when you've got TJD or Looney on the floor, and if you've got either Kyle Anderson or Draymond playing alongside those guys as well. I think it's part of the reason why Loon was out of the rotation for 5 of the previous 6 games, basically before Thursday's game or yesterday's game against Detroit, is because they wanted to space the floor out. They wanted to go a bit small. They wanted to have Slow-Mo and Draymond, who aren't necessarily great shooters, but they will take them and occasionally make them. And in the case of Draymond, like, he's been pretty good from 3-point range over the past 2 seasons now, basically. So that's a huge factor, I think. And just watching Quinten Post play for 7 minutes and just seeing the pick and pops, and the fact that Thomas Bryant, who I think that play might have came before Quinten Post actually made his 3. So the fact that Thomas Bryant was out guarding QP beyond the paint, close to the perimeter, even before he'd made a shot, like, just the threat of him taking a 3-pointer allowed Buddy Hield an easy pass to the rim for a layup. And that just made me think, okay, like, nice Quinten Post minutes. I'm excited for his development, but he is still a developmental piece. Now, why he's doing that, why he's in the G League, go and get yourself a Nikola Vucevic, a Kelly Olynyk, someone. Obviously, watching Miles Turner again today, that's the perfect player for the Warriors, because he also brings the defensive shot blocking element as well. But that was the biggest thing for me. Like, go and get an experienced veteran stretch 5, because it can open up stuff like we saw in Quinten Post minutes. And Quinten Post is, what was that? He's like 3rd or 4th career game, I think. And it was his first made 3. It's not like this guy's been drilling threes at a high volume, at a high rate. It's not like he's been in the rotation whatsoever. And yet Thomas Bryant and the Pacers were actually still out there guarding him and allowing Buddy Hield an easy layup. So that was the biggest factor for me. Again, in a game where there's very little to be taken from, given the absences, that one for me, just seeing Quinten Post, yes, a glimpse, 7 minutes, exciting. Let's get him, back to the G League predominantly, get him developing, getting him putting up the kind of huge performances he has. I think he's had 3 20-plus performances in a row for the Santa Cruz Warriors, 29 and 30 points, breaking his career highs in back-to-back games, double-digit rebounding performances. I think the last 3 games, he shot like 70% from the floor and 54% from 3-point range. I love it. And you know what? If the season continues to go downhill a bit, then maybe at some point you do have to pull the plug, and maybe that allows Quinten Post to get some genuine run later in the season. But I still have optimism that that's not going to be the case just yet, and therefore that the Warriors do need to go out and get a Vucevic, a Kelly Olynyk. Again, be absolutely ideal if they could get Miles Turner. I'm not sure how much he's going to want in free agency. Again, I don't think that's going to be the case. I don't think he was big. He was obviously big in the game at Chase Center just a couple of weeks ago, but what did he have in this game? Yeah, he had 11 points, 7 rebounds, 2 assists, 3 blocks. Again, his defensive presence is so big, and that's why he'd be such an ideal player rather than a Vucevic or an Olynyk, whose defense is a bit more of a question mark. And he's as opposed to Olynyk, he's a genuine starting caliber player on a good team like the Pacers. Made the Eastern Conference Finals last season, and they've been red hot recently as well. What have they won? 12 of their past 15 games or something like that. Just in regard to Buddy Hield, Thandecker there saying him having the same amount of points as Pat Spencer. Credit to Pat Spencer. He was one of the rare positives for the Warriors. It is pretty difficult to be necessarily too positive on it, because he's still a guy. It's like Guy Santos yesterday. A very important and impressive performance from Guy. He was also good in this game. He had 11 points, 4 or 5 shooting, 2 or 2 from 3. So he was 5 of 7 from 5 of 6 from 3-point range over these last 2 games. Had 2 rebounds, 3 assists, 3 steals. So I like what Guy did again. He was a +9, which was a team high. So he was good again. But the thing is, I still think ideally, like, you don't want to see too many. I don't think Guy Santos is going to be part of the rotation. I don't think you want to see too many Guy Santos minutes. You don't want to see any Pat Spencer minutes, because that means that either Curry or Schroder aren't playing, or even Pajemski's obviously out at the moment. He would have probably filled that backup point guard spot had he been there. So, yeah, it's good to see these guys developing and playing well, but ultimately they're not going to be the ones that take the Warriors to the playoffs. And so how much does it really mean? Credit again to Pat, though, like 7 of 13. I thought what I've been impressed with him in the minutes he's played this season is the ability to get to the paint and break down a defense. And it's something that I don't think Warrior players generally do very well. And I've been particularly disappointed in Schroder in the fact that he hasn't been able to get to the paint as much as what you'd probably think, given what was advertised after the first bit of the season in Brooklyn. So credit to Pat. But as for Buddy Hield, played well yesterday, team high 19 points, finished with 17 today, but far less efficient. 6 of 19 from the floor, 3 of 12 from 3-point range. Too much. And again, I understand like Steph, Kuminga, Wiggins out. Like I get it, but way too much. It's a car crash. It's a car crash whenever Buddy Hield gets the ball and puts the ball on the floor. Like he had that one layup, as I mentioned before, where he got a wide open one thanks to post gravity, basically more than anything. But other than that, anytime he puts the ball on the floor or tries to create for himself or others, it's a car crash. It's a train wreck. It makes me age 10 years. And it's, as I said yesterday, 24 hours ago, it's very similar to Clay last season, where maybe occasionally something can happen and it can look good, but more often than not, it's pretty inefficient. It generally doesn't work. And he's just got to be better at giving up the ball and getting back off the ball and being strictly a catch and shoot player. I'm glad he only had 17 points today because it would have ruined the Warriors' 9-0 record when he has 18 plus points. But yeah, again, it's hard to be too critical in this game because he did need to do a little bit more, obviously, when Steph's not there and when Wiggins and Kuminga are not there. I understand that. And so I give him a bit of a pass, but 6 of 19 and 3 of 12 is still obviously very poor. A few more comments from you guys. Sandex says we missed so many open layups. Paula says a complete overhaul of this team is needed. All right, Paula, let me know what you think. What's the overhaul that you're clamoring for before the deadline? Let me know, or in the off season potentially further on down the line. Paula also says Schroder has been a huge disappointment. Yeah, I would actually be. I was more disappointed in Schroeder's game today than Buddy Hield's. And I know that sounds weird because Buddy was 6 of 19 from the floor, 3 of 12 from 3, inefficient. But Schroder, to me, these are the kind of games where, like, this is now the team he was on with Brooklyn to start the season was more talented than this Golden State team, but not by an incredibly significant amount, I wouldn't have thought. And so this, he was having games. Remember that game he played against Golden State at Chase Center earlier in the season where he went for like 30 points. And that's the kind, if the Warriors were going to win this game, he was the one to me that I was looking at and thinking, okay, can you have a breakout 25 plus point performance where you're really efficient and you have your 5-6 assists and get others involved? Can you do that? And he just didn't. Like, he didn't look like it at any point. I thought he was pretty passive in a game that asked and needed his offensive production and offensive juice. Again, you can be critical of Buddy Hield, but at least Buddy Hield tried and was trying to make things happen. He's not the one that should be doing that, but at least he tried. Schroder, to me, I just thought he was way too passive. Like, he should be probably taking more than 13 shot attempts. Now, again, inefficient 5-13, 1 of 6. The 3 ball is disgusting. He's now 9.9 points on 33.1% from the floor and 25% from 3-point range in 13 games for the Warriors. That's more than a huge disappointment. That's appalling, really. It's basically half the production that he was putting up in Brooklyn. And we knew there was going to be, obviously, coming from the Nets to the Warriors, there was going to be an adjustment. There was going to be a clear, he would take a backseat a little bit, given the different, given Steph Curry and the different rosters there between the Nets and the Warriors. We knew that the numbers were going to decline somewhat, but for him to be averaging half the amount of points, to be shooting less than 35% from the field, 25% from beyond the arc, it's really poor. And this game, I know he was good the other a few days ago, basically last week, whatever it was, when Steph was out and the Warriors got a win. I get that. But this game asked for him to basically go for 20, 25 points. And he just didn't really didn't seem invested in the game. Like, he just didn't bring the energy and the offensive creativity that Golden State needed. And in the end of the day, you get that kind of result where you put up 96 points and, Gee hits some shots and Pat Spencer even gives you something, but the Warriors were never going to win that game with, with the kind of offensive firepower that they put out there, unless they got Schroder, who is the one player capable of going for like 25 or 30. Like, they needed that, and he just didn't provide it whatsoever. Then Decker says, would you trade Wiggins for a big? Who's the big? Because a lot of these guys you can get by retaining Wiggins, like Vucevic. I'm not giving up Wiggins for Vucevic, and he can be had anyway without Wiggins. Miles Turner's on a pretty similar contract number where you could probably get him for without giving up Wiggins, although you might have to give up Kuminga in that situation just from the value perspective. Kelly Olynyk the same. Do you want like Zion Williamson? We've seen Zion today. He's been suspended from the Pelicans for what did he miss the team flight or just multiple different things here recently, which his professionalism continues to be in question. I wouldn't mind Zion. His fit at the Warriors is a little questionable when you've got Draymond and Kuminga. One of those guys would have to go out at least. I think if you're going to trade for Zion, I'd almost rather keep Wiggins and trade Draymond. I know I've had that discussion previously. It doesn't sound like the Warriors are going to be too interested in Zion. I don't think the Pelicans are going to be too interested in trading Zion before the deadline. Maybe it's an off-season thing. So who's the big man that you would want that you actually need to give Wiggins up for? Because a lot of these guys we're talking about can be acquired without giving up Wiggs. Andrew the Goat says, I'm so mad at the Warriors. They just gave the Pacers a free win tonight. Warriors need to stop giving teams free wins. Well, that's the thing when you don't have a quote-unquote second star, right, where the Warriors rest Steph Curry, and in any game you rest Steph and you also rest – I mean, I was going to say whenever any game you rest Steph, you're going to struggle, but the Warriors are, 5-2 or 6-2 without Steph this season, so they've actually been okay. But when you're also missing Kuminga and you're also missing Wiggins, you're guaranteed to lose. Like, I came into this game and I think losing by 12 and the fight was actually pretty good. I thought it was a pretty respectable result. I'm not disappointed with the game. I suppose you can be disappointed as fans, as you're saying, Andrew. Like, you can be disappointed that the Warriors went into this game with no Steph, with no Draymond. Like, those guys played yesterday. They're dealing with stuff. We know that. They could have played. They could have easily played had the Warriors wanted them to, and if they were more desperate to win. And at what point, when you're now back to 519 on the season, at what point do you have to be desperate enough to say, hey, Steph, Draymond, we know you're struggling, but like, we have to go somewhere here. We have to try and build some momentum. And if, we just rest you on the second night of the back-to-back, then all of the positives from the win over Detroit on Thursday, they kind of go out the door. Now, as I said yesterday, it's kind of a good thing. Obviously, the Warriors got the win in Detroit. It meant that, they could almost give this game up without it really, really hurting. Now, it still hurts that you lose this game and you're back to 500. But if you'd lost to the Pistons the night before, then all of a sudden you're 18-20 and 2 games below 500. So that was it afforded them. I would have been interested to see if Steph and Draymond would have rested had the Warriors actually lost on Thursday. That would have been interesting to me. Paula says, I want to see Buddy Schroder traded. We need to retain JK, let Pods and Moody go. Okay. I agree with you on the Buddy Hield, Dennis Schroder thing. There's a lot of stuff about Buddy Hield at the moment. I actually don't hate it necessarily. I just think the Warriors' reliance on him is too much. Like, they just should be relying on him less as an offensive option. And that's shown again in the fact that the Warriors are 9-0 when he scores 18 or more and like 10-19 when he doesn't. So there's too much of a reliance on him. His contract is fine. Like, 4-year, $37.4 million contract. That's still okay to me. Like, I don't think any teams, trying to trade for it anytime soon. I don't think it's great value necessarily, but I also don't think it's bad value. Like, he just needs to be this microwave scorer who can occasionally give you 15, 20 points off the bench, but the Warriors shouldn't require that in order to win. And so they just need to get better up top in terms of their offensive firepower and their talent, which would kind of push Buddy Hield down a rung or two in terms of, that offensive need from him, I suppose. Berserk Monk says, wouldn't have had to go and try to find that second ball handler shot creator if someone didn't punch their teammate. yeah, there's that stuff still floating around with Draymond wanting to talk about that. Jordan Poole's been on a tear recently. He would be very helpful right now. I mean, it is what it is. We can't go back and change history, unfortunately. Well, I mean, we could trade back for Jordan Poole, but and the Wizards would probably, if you're willing to give up something, maybe the Wizards would do it. But let's not. That's not going to happen. So let's not talk about it. It's disappointing. It's what happened, and yeah, we'll continue. There'll be a lot to be discussed about, I think, post Draymond's retirement, maybe. And it'll continue to be a factor so long as JP's still in the league as well. But there's no real point talking about it, I don't think. Paula says, I would also let Wiggs go for a big. Again, what's the big? Cornelis says to Paula Desmond, I like that trade proposal. Thendex says Steph and Dre can't continue sitting out. We won't even make the play-in at this rate. Yeah, the Kings won today. The Kings have won 6 in a row. They beat Boston 114-97. So they've pushed back to 519-19. It's a really weird spot because the Warriors are in massive trouble in terms of like they could legitimately just miss the play-in tournament whatsoever. They could finish as low as 12th, really. Maybe even just having a look here. No, they're not going to finish 13th, 14th, or 15th because the Trailblazers, Jazz, and Pelicans have got that locked in. But yeah, like you've got, I think the Spurs probably won't make it, but otherwise, like one of the Kings, Warriors, Suns, Clippers, probably it looks right now, looks most likely Kings, Warriors, or Suns. One of those three teams will miss the play-in tournament entirely, which would be a disaster for any of those three teams, let's be honest. But at the same time, like the Warriors could also try and talk themselves into, oh, well, we're only 3 games off the 4 seed. If we go on a bit of a run here, maybe we can make things happen, which as weird as it sounds, given they've lost 16 of their last 23 games, they're actually still in a better position than they were this time last season. You got to remember they were 19-24 after 43 games last year. And they were ultimately just too far back. They finished the season 27-12 over 39 games, over the last 39 games, and yet still only managed to get 10th, have to go on the road for a play-in tournament game, get blown out by the Kings. If the Warriors went on a 27-12 run from right now, then all of a sudden they're 46-31 after 77 games. And that would definitely have you in the top 4 or 5 in the Western Conference easily. And so it's weird to say they're still actually, I'm not sure if they're roster-wise they're in a better position, but until they go on a 5-game losing streak from here and are also 19-24 again, they're actually still in a bit of a better spot just in terms of record-wise, obviously, and their place in the Western Conference. Few other comments from you guys here. Paul says, yeah, but what does Buddy truly add? Well, if you actually look at his season numbers, I know it's been split in two by an excellent first 8 to 10 games and then just crap ever since. But he's 38.7% from 3-point range this season on still high volume over 7 attempts per game. So if a guy's going to be shooting 39% from 3 on over 7 attempts, he's still a rotation player for you. And the Warriors just lack shooting so much that I just think to me, there's no, you could still trade him. You could trade him, I understand it, but you kind of need to bring in a shooter on the other end. And there's no, maybe come playoff time if the Warriors get that far, but there's no real question to me of whether or not, should Buddy Hield start getting DNPs? I don't think so. I just think the Warriors desperately lack 3-point shooting, and that's what he brings. So I don't know. Maybe you could argue that Moody and Lindy Waters should be ahead of him, but he's capable. He's capable of having, 18 to 20-point games, as those guys aren't. If I was an opposing team, I think Buddy Hield would scare me more. Now, he could have outlier performances either way. He can have really, really bad games, and he can also have really, really good games. And as an opposing team, that would kind of scare me a little bit. I don't know. We'll wait and see. George Mack says, if the Warriors would just do what the Kings did, get rid of their head coach, the Warriors would be playing much better with more energy. possibly a factor. We'll see what happens with the Kings moving forward, and if it's just that kind of sugar hit you get when you sack a coach, or whether it's there's actually sustainable stuff going on here from Doug Christie in terms of he's obviously made some changes to their rotation and stuff like that. So we'll wait and see if that's a long-term thing and whether they actually become a good team again over the second half of the season. I know there are a lot of people on social media and a lot of Warrior fans that are clamoring for Steve Kerr to get the axe, and he makes mistakes like everyone. There's no doubt about that. But I think we also have to picture here that just like when we talk about the potential of Draymond getting traded, the idea of Steph Curry being okay with firing Steve Kerr is something that I still have a hard time wrestling with. Like, I don't think Steph's going to be happy with that. He's obviously had so much success under Steve, 4 championships. And I think so long as Steph Curry is with the Golden State Warriors, you're probably likely to find that Steve Kerr is also with the Golden State Warriors, and most likely Draymond Green is also with the franchise as well. Cornelius says, I learned a couple of things. I know tonight we need shooting and big man that can get buckets, and Loon needs more minutes. He plays so hard. Yeah, like, I don't know, Looney's an interesting one because he does play hard and you can never question his effort. He's limited as a player, but he can still be impactful and effective for you. He's also on an $8 million expiring contract. And so to get another big man, he might need to be required, because if you go and get a Vucevic, let's say, then all of a sudden you got Vucevic, you got Jackson Davis. Is Looney going to be in the picture at all? I don't know. It's an interesting one. Maybe it's a scenario where you could have all 3 guys. Maybe it's a scenario where you trade Loon and then try and re-sign him in free agency on a minimum contract. I don't know. We'll wait and see. Same thing can be said there in regard to Gary Payton II, who it sounds like he could be back on Monday against the Toronto Raptors. Cornelis says Santos got a good-looking shot. Yeah, he spoke after the game yesterday how much he's been working on it kind of quietly, because he obviously hasn't been getting any rotation minutes. So it's nice from a Warrior fan's perspective to see him get these couple of games to showcase that he can shoot the ball. And I think it's probably the thing that might make or break his career, because the hustle stuff is really good. The energy he provides, diving on the floor for loose balls, the rebounding stuff, that's all great. That's all comes into it. But you've still got to have some pretty significant substance to be a long-term NBA player. And that includes being able to, as a 6'8" guy, being able to shoot the ball at a pretty high level. And, he's shown over these last 2 games that he can do that. So he's been definitely the biggest positive from these past 48 hours, no doubt about that. Then next says, we continue chucking threes and we're not making them. We should attack the paint more. Yep, it's very easy to say that. Who should attack the paint? Because who actually can attack the paint? And when they get to the paint, finish. Who can do that? Schroder should have been doing that. Like, that was the idea, bringing him in, that he's a guy that can attack the paint, finish, kick out to shooters. Hasn't done it. Just blatantly has not done it. Steph can do it a little bit, but that also brings a physical toll on him as a 36-year-old who's dealing with these knee issues. Kuminga's obviously a big loss, and he's the guy that does that primarily. And obviously when he comes back, we'll see more of that, stuff inside, and the Warriors, going to him and trying to get buckets on the interior. But other than that, like, who else? Like, I don't think Wiggins uses his athleticism enough to get to the rim. Who else does it? Who else can actually penetrate the defense and get by a guy? Just, they don't have it. Goes back to, was it Thandecker? Did you say that before in regard to, Berserk Monk, said in regard to Jordan Poole. He's a guy that can do that. He's a guy that can get by, who does have quickness to get by guys, get to the rim, as well as his shooting. So again, another reason as to why it would be nice if the Warriors still had him. Bree says the Warriors aren't serious about winning if they plan on sitting Steph and Dre for back-to-back games. This is already a mediocre team. Yep, hard to argue. Hard to argue with that. At what point of the season does it become desperate and urgent enough where those guys just have to play? Sorry, ideally we'd rest you, but we're not in the position to be able to do that. At what point? Maybe once the second half of the season ticks over and we're past game 41, possibly. Cornelius says, man, Dennis looks disinterested, like he doesn't belong. We might be worse since he came. He needs to come off the bench. Yeah, every game, it's Dennis needs to come off the bench. My answer to that is who starts instead? Who starts? Is it Buddy Hield? People having a go at him in the chat, rightly so. Moody wasn't impressive tonight. Just came, obviously missed yesterday's game. He had 7 points on 11 shots, 1 of 5 from 3. Didn't have a great game. Pods has obviously had a disappointing sophomore season. Like this, do we go back to Lindy Waters? There's just not the option. And again, I think their best option right now is to get Vucevic and just go big and say, okay, you know what? Our shooting's not going to be great, but now we've got 5 guys who can all theoretically shoot, like they'll all at least attempt threes. We've got a little bit more interior force with, Vucevic's, post game and his ability to finish inside. We've got Kuminga. Why don't we go to Steph, Wiggins, Kuminga, Draymond, Vucevic? I think that's your best lineup. And then Schroder can be a 6-man in that scenario. But otherwise, on the current roster, yes, it's easy to say, Schroder should be coming off the bench. Who should be starting instead of him? Bree says, good point, George Mack. That was regards to Steve. Conan says, Moody shooting good. Dennis giving the same numbers Moody gave you tonight, and I like that big lineup. Yeah, possibly. I mean, Moody was not good in this game, and he's been the knee stuff with him is a bit of a concern because he's been in and out of the lineup for a few weeks here, so it's a bit bizarre. But the Warriors shoot 10 of 38 from 3-point range, 26.3%, 38 and 92, 41.3% from 3. Again, going back to it, the biggest thing I learned from this game was the 7 minutes of Quinten Post, and that just reiterating the need for a stretch 5 because it can open up so much for you in terms of those, a guy like Quinten Post or a stretch big actually being able to take and make threes. But also, we know the Warriors are basically the worst finishing team in the league. Some of their finishing should actually get better because all of a sudden the opposing big man has to guard the perimeter, guard the big guy out on the perimeter, as opposed to being an interior 4 shot blocking presence. So that's to me what I learned from this game. Just go and get Vucevic. It's interesting. Jake Fisher said earlier today. Jake Fisher of Bleacher Report was of Yahoo Sports, also NBA insider for the Stein line. He said that he still thinks the Warriors could be a factor in a Jimmy Butler trade, but in the last 24 hours, once Schroeder's deal becomes available to be traded again. So that's interesting. Otherwise, I still don't think a big, massive blockbuster trade is on the horizon. So just go and get Vucevic. I don't know what's truly stopping you. You're a mediocre team. You're probably still not going to be that good with Vucevic, but at least it gives you something different. Like, it gives you something different to look at. It gives you a little bit more offensive firepower. He's very consistent in terms of availability. Like, he never misses games. He's having a great season. 20 and 10 guy, over 40% from 3. Could be had relatively cheaply for expiring salaries and maybe a first-round pick or Moody or something like that. Just go and do it. Just go and do it. All right, I'm going to finish it up there. Been going for nearly 35 minutes here. Thank you very much to all of you that have commented. If you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel already, that would be greatly appreciated. You can follow me at POC252. That's POK252 on X/Twitter. We're also on Instagram, TikTok, Golden State with mates as well. Warriors play the Raptors in Toronto on Monday. I'll be back for a post-game live after that. I might also do a podcast episode before that as well, particularly if there's any more trade stuff. That's obviously the biggest thing at the moment. If there's any more to be said about Vucevic or Butler or anyone or anything in regard to potential trade stuff that we could see imminently, then I'll jump back on and do a podcast episode. Other than that, have a great weekend ahead. Post-game live, as I said, after Monday's game against the Raptors. Let's hope the Warriors can try and find some momentum because it's been pretty arduous and difficult to watch here over the past 23 games where they've only won 7 and lost 16. Thanks again, guys.